I'm Daniel, 28, a U.S. Army soldier from Texas, raised on faith and duty yet torn by what I've seen. I died in that Jesus. In that light, he showed me a shocking truth about Trump's hands in Gaza and how American silence feeds suffering. I can't stay quiet anymore. In January 2024, an IED took my life during a patrol. But first, let me tell you who I was before that moment changed everything.
I grew up in a small Texas town where everyone knew who you were and what you did. No matter what the weather was like, my mom Linda made sure we went to church every Sunday morning. When you're having a hard time, she leaves little Bible verses on your pillow and prays over her coffee in the morning. My dad, Robert, is a Vietnam War veteran who doesn't talk much about his time in the service. You can see it in his eyes, though, when he looks far away and seems to be somewhere else. Over the years, Dad and I had grown apart. I think he wanted to be proud of me joining the army, but we weren't getting along. It was like he was watching me walk down a path he wished he hadn't taken. Emily, my little sister, was always the brave one in our family. She would call me while I was away and ask me the tough questions that no one else would. "Danny," she'd say, she's the only one who still calls me that, "do you ever wonder if what you're doing over there is actually helping anyone?" When she said things like that, I used to get defensive. I'd tell her about duty and honor and how important it is to protect freedom. But really? At night, lying in my bunk and looking at the ceiling, I would hear her questions over and over. The truth was that I was starting to think the same things. You know that feeling when you think you're doing the right thing, but you start to doubt it? That was me for months before I passed away. I had signed up to be a good person and serve my country, but it was getting harder to sleep at night because of the violence, the families being torn apart, and the fear in the voices of the children. I remember this one night, maybe 3 weeks before the explosion. I was sitting outside our base when a little boy, who couldn't have been more than 6, walked by with his grandma. He had these big, scared eyes that looked at me. Not mad, just scared. I thought about Emily back home and how she used to look at me like I was her hero when we were kids. This little boy was looking at me like I was scary. I called home that night, hoping to hear Emily's voice, but I got Mom instead. She asked, "How are you doing, sweetheart?" And I could hear her stirring something in the kitchen, most likely making cookies to sell at church. What a normal, quiet sound. "I'm fine, Mom," I lied. "How do you tell your praying mother that you're not sure you still believe in what you're fighting for? How do you tell her that the uniform she loves so much is getting heavier every day?" "I pray for you every night and every morning," she said. "Please keep you safe, God, and use you for good." "Thanks, Mom." I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell her about the little boy's eyes, the questions that kept me up at night, and how far away from God I felt even though everyone around me was talking about duty and righteousness. But the words just wouldn't come. Doubt is lonely, that's the thing. You begin to doubt everything you thought you knew about yourself, what is right and wrong, and God's plan. And you can't talk to anyone about it because you're the one who's supposed to be strong, the one who's supposed to protect, and the one who knows everything. At some point, I think everyone has felt that kind of spiritual emptiness. It feels like you're going through the motions of faith, but your heart isn't really in it. I had always thought that America was God's chosen country and that our military was doing his work around the world. But as I stood in that desert, watching the never-ending cycle of violence and revenge, I felt more lost than faithful. You might understand what it's like to not feel like the person you used to be. That was me in the last few weeks. The Daniel who had signed up with confidence, who had thought there were clear good guys and bad guys, and who had thought following orders was the same as following God was going away. And I didn't know who was taking his place. The worst part was that I felt like I was letting everyone down. My parents taught me to serve something bigger than myself. Emily needed her big brother to be a role model for her. My fellow soldiers who depended on me to watch their backs, and maybe even God, who I wasn't sure was still paying attention. Some mornings I would wake up and look in the small mirror above my sink, trying to figure out who was looking back at me. When had the confidence gone from my eyes? When did my faith become more of a habit than a feeling? 3 days before I died, I wrote a letter to my family, but never sent it. I told Emily that she was right to question things in it. I told Dad that I was starting to understand why he never talked about Vietnam. I told Mom I loved her prayers, but I wasn't sure they were still getting to me. I put it in my pocket with the picture of our family from last Christmas. That day in January 2024, I was a young man torn between duty and doubt, faith and fear, the person I had always been and the person I was becoming. I had no idea that everything I thought I knew about God, America, and my place in this world was about to change forever in a few hours. It was just like any other patrol day. I had that familiar knot in my stomach and my mom's voice in my head, praying for my safety halfway around the world. We were driving through a stretch of desert road that we had been on many times before. The sun was shining hard and there was dust everywhere. It got in your mouth and eyes and covered everything with a fine layer of grit. I was in the second car, watching the scenery go by and thinking about the letter in my pocket. I wondered if I would ever have the guts to send it. Then, all of a sudden, everything changed. The explosion came out of nowhere, a loud roar that sounded like it would tear the world apart. I was sitting in that truck 1 second, and the next I was flying through the air, with my body twisting like a rag doll. It hurt right away, and was so bad that it felt like someone had set my chest on fire and taken all the air out of my lungs at the same time. I fell hard and landed on my face in the sand. There was yelling, gunfire, and smoke so thick I could barely see. It was all a mess, but the fear is what I remember most clearly. I felt pure animal fear flooding through every part of me. I knew I was going to die. My friend Martinez was standing still about 10 feet away from me. There was a blood pooling in the sand below him. I tried to crawl toward him, but every time I moved, I felt like I was being hit by lightning. "Wait," I said softly, reaching out my hand even though I could barely lift it. "Wait a minute, Martinez." That's when my sight began to fade. The sounds of battle faded away, as if I were hearing them through water. I couldn't breathe anymore. I could feel my heart stop. You know when it happens, but it's hard to put into words. One beat, then another, then nothing in your chest. The fear should have grown, but something else happened that was unexpected. This amazing peace started at my toes and spread up through my whole body. It was like finally getting to take a warm, soft bath after being cold all your life. Then I was floating. I get what you're saying. If someone had told me this story 6 months ago, I would have thought they were crazy. But it felt so strange to look down at my own body lying there in the sand, like taking off a coat that was too tight and realizing how limited you'd been. My body looked so small and weak down there. My uniform had blood on it, and my face was calm in a way it hadn't been in months. I felt both sad and relieved. Sad for the young man who had so much doubt and fear, and relieved that all that weight was gone. The world below started to fade, and I began to rise, but not like I was in an airplane. It felt more like invisible hands were gently pulling me towards something I couldn't see yet, but somehow knew was safe. The fear was gone, and in its place was a sense of wonder and curiosity that reminded me of being a kid on Christmas morning. I could see everything below me as I climbed higher. Our convoy, my fellow soldiers rushing to help the wounded, and the smoke and dust settling. But it all seemed far away now, like watching a movie about someone else's life. I wanted to tell them I was fine and that they didn't have to worry about me anymore, but my voice didn't work the same way up here. After that, the light came. People have tried to explain this light before, but they always fall short. It wasn't just bright, it was brighter than the sun in the desert at noon. It was living. Not cold, full of this love that made all the good feelings I'd ever had seem weak. It felt like being held by my mother when I was 5 years old, but 1,000,000 times more. As I got closer to the light, I could see a shape forming inside of it. I knew I was looking at Jesus without anyone having to tell me. He didn't look like the pictures in our church back home. His face was more real than that. It was more alive, with this impossible mix of strength and softness. His eyes held the knowledge of all time, but when he looked at me, it was as if I was the only person who had ever lived. "Daniel," he said, and his voice was everything I had been looking for my whole life without even knowing it. It was the perfect sound of my father's approval, my mother's comfort, and Emily's understanding all at once. That was when I really lost it. I let all the tears I'd been holding back for months, maybe years, out. All the doubt, fear, loneliness, and spiritual emptiness that had been weighing me down like stones in my chest came pouring out. I fell to my knees in that light and cried like a little kid. "I don't know where I am," I said through my tears. "I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing down there. I'm not sure if I'm helping or hurting. I don't even know if you're real, and I'm sorry for doubting, but When Jesus knelt down next to me and put his hand on my shoulder, I felt whole again. He told me, "My child, you are loved more than you can imagine. Your questions don't keep you away from me. They bring you closer. I felt completely safe for the first time in years. Not only safe in my body, but safe in my soul. It's okay to be confused, okay to doubt, and okay to say that I didn't know everything. I didn't have to be the strong soldier, the dutiful son, or the protective big brother when he was there. It was enough for me to just be Daniel, scared, confused, and looking for Daniel. I looked up at his face, and the love I saw there was so strong it almost hurt. This wasn't love that depended on what I'd done or not done. This was love for who I really was, beyond all the uniforms, expectations, and mistakes. "Come with me," Jesus said softly, helping me up. "Something about the pain you've seen and how America is involved in it. Are you ready?" I nodded, but to be honest, I wasn't sure I was ready for anything. Being with Jesus felt like being in the warmest sunlight you could imagine. Part of me just wanted to stay there forever, soaking up that perfect love. But I could tell from the look in his eyes that what he wanted to show me was important. "Daniel," he said, his voice gentle but serious, "you've been carrying questions about your service, about America's role in the conflicts you've witnessed. You may have wondered if you're doing more harm than good. Let me show you the truth." The area around us changed all of a sudden. We were standing above what looked like Gaza, but I could see it better than any news report or satellite picture. I could see into people's homes, their hearts, and the pain that lived in every street and building. "Look," Jesus said, and I saw things happen below us. I saw a mother in Gaza holding her little boy, who might have been the same age as the boy who looked at me with such fear. She was softly singing to him in Arabic to calm him down as explosions went off in the distance. She kept singing even though her voice was shaking. At that moment, she looked just like my mom. She had the same protective love and desperate prayers for her child's safety. Jesus said softly, "Every mother's love is the same. All kids are afraid of the same things." The scene changed, and I was now looking at a room in Washington, D.C. Men in expensive suits were sitting around a polished table and talking about weapons shipments and aid packages as if they were talking about the weather. There were charts and graphs, but I didn't see any pictures of kids' faces on the walls. No moms singing lullabies to soothe their scared babies. "They make choices about lives they've never seen," Jesus said with sadness. "They move money and weapons around like chess pieces, not remembering that each piece is a beating heart." I was crying as I watched. "But Lord," I said, "isn't America supposed to do good things in the world?" That's what I learned as a child. That's what I thought when I signed up. Jesus looked at me, and his face showed both sadness and hope. America was blessed to be a blessing to other people. Your country has a lot of power, resources, and influence, but power without my love is a burden, not a gift. He showed me more visions at that time. I saw American weapons being used to hurt people who weren't involved. I heard politicians talk about freedom while ignoring people's pain. But I also saw American doctors helping hurt kids, American teachers building schools, and American families sending help to people who had lost everything in a disaster. Do you see, Daniel? Your country isn't bad, but it has lost its way. When a country, even one based on godly principles, starts to trust its own strength more than me, even its good intentions become bad. I thought about my dad then, about how he would stare off into space with a haunted look in his eyes. Is that what happened to my dad when he was in Vietnam? Did he see the same thing? Your father saw how much it cost to fight wars without knowing why. Jesus said softly. He came home with guilt that he shouldn't have had to deal with. Men who never had to pull a trigger or watch a friend die made the choices that put him in that jungle. I was crying a lot. I don't know how to fix this, Lord. I'm just a single soldier. I don't make rules or lead armies. What can I do? At that moment, Jesus smiled, and it was like seeing the sun rise after the darkest night. Daniel, you think your influence is small because you've been looking at it through the lens of the world. But I don't use governments or armies to change people's minds. I work through people who are willing to speak the truth with love. He then showed me another vision. I saw myself back home in Texas, but things were different. I was telling my story to groups of veterans. I saw men and women who had the same doubts and guilt as I did, and their faces changed as they listened. I saw them find the same peace that I was feeling at the time. Jesus said, "Everyone you touch with this truth will touch others." A Texas mother who stops believing easy answers about wars in other countries might call her congressman. A veteran who has healed might be able to help other veterans heal as well. A young person thinking about joining the military might ask better questions about what they're really doing. But what about the people who are hurting right now? I asked, remembering the mother singing to her son. What about the kids who are scared right now? Jesus' face became even more soft. Do you really think I don't see every tear, Daniel? Do you think I can't hear every prayer said in the dark? I am working with people all over the world, in Gaza, Israel, America, and everywhere else, to spread peace. But those seeds need people who are willing to water them with love and truth. He showed me more than that. Even though they were hurting, I saw regular people in Gaza and Israel choose mercy over revenge. I saw Americans turning down simple answers to complicated problems. I saw young people asking their leaders to do better, asking harder questions and choosing kindness over apathy. This is how I do my job, Jesus said, not through force, politics, or military might, but through hearts that choose love even when it's hard. Because of people who refuse to let suffering become normal or okay just because it's far away. I was starting to get it, but it was too much. Lord, how do I get this message back? How do I get people to pay attention? You don't make them pay attention, Daniel. You just tell the truth about what you've been through. You tell them that every child, no matter where they were born, is important to me. You tell them that they can still choose to be quiet when they see something wrong. You tell them that I love them too much to let them be okay with other people's pain. He put his hands on my shoulders, and I felt a strength flowing into me that I had never felt before. Not physical strength, but something deeper. The bravery to tell the truth even when it's not popular. The wisdom to look beyond simple answers, and the love to care about people I've never met. Jesus said, your father has been carrying shame that isn't his. When you come back, you'll be able to help him get rid of that burden. Emily, your sister, has been asking the right questions, but she needs someone who has been through both sides to help her figure out how to turn her compassion into action. Your mom has been praying for you to be safe, but now she'll pray for you to find your purpose. I felt my heart swell with more love than I could have ever imagined. I love my family, my fellow soldiers, that mother in Gaza, the men making decisions in Washington, and even the enemies I had been taught to fear. It wasn't a weak, sentimental love. It was strong, protective, and determined. I don't want to leave you, I said softly. I have been looking for this peace and love my whole life. Things are so hard and painful down there. Jesus smiled once more. Daniel, I'm not sending you away from me. I'm sending you to speak for me. I'm always there when you speak the truth with love. I'm there every time you choose kindness over ease. I'm there for you every time you help someone else get better. He showed me one last vision, my family, but months from now. I could see myself sitting on the back porch with my dad, and we were finally able to talk about how heavy the weight we had been carrying was. Emily's eyes lit up when she realized that her hard questions had helped me get to this point of clarity. I could see my mother's face when she realized that her prayers had done more than keep me safe. They had given me a purpose. Jesus said, the kids who are hurting need people to speak for them. Not voices of anger or politics, but voices of love that help people see past their own comfort to the pain of others. Your country has been asleep, letting other people make decisions for them without thinking about what will happen. But people who have seen the light can wake up those who are sleeping. I could feel myself starting to pull away from that place of perfect peace, and panic rose in my chest. Hold on, Lord, I'm not ready. What if I can't remember everything you've taught me? What if people don't trust me? What if I fail? When Jesus touched my forehead, I felt completely sure right away. You will remember what you need to when you need to remember it. And Daniel, you can't fail at loving people. That's all I want you to do. Tell them the truth because you love them. Love them enough to question what they think is true. Love them enough to help them understand that every child is important to me. As the light began to fade, Jesus said one last time, tell them that America's strength was meant to protect the innocent, not let them suffer. Tell them that I see every choice made in their name, and they will be just as responsible for their silence as their leaders are for what they do. But you should also tell them that it's not too late to change. Love is always a choice. And then I fell, slowly but surely, back toward my broken body lying in the sand of the desert. It felt like jumping into ice water after lying in the sun for a long time. I was suddenly stuck again in a body that hurt, lungs that were having trouble getting air, and a heart that beat with ragged uncertainty. The endless love that had been around me was gone, and in its place were the harsh sounds of helicopter blades and urgent medical voices. Someone yelled, "We've got a pulse." He's back. But a part of me wasn't back. I was sad because I had lost that perfect peace, that full understanding, and that overwhelming feeling of being truly home for the first time in my life. I cried in that military hospital because I was in pain, but also because I missed Jesus in a way I had never felt before. Even though I was sad to leave that bright place, I felt something burning in my chest that was stronger than sadness. It was for a reason. I could still remember every word Jesus had said and every vision he had shown me. I had things to do. The doctors said it was a miracle that I got better. They said that the injuries that should have killed me had somehow healed in a way they couldn't explain. But I knew that the real miracle was in my heart, not in my body. I asked to be sent back to Texas as soon as I was well enough to travel. Not to a military hospital, but to their own home. I had to talk to people, fix relationships, and think about my family, which I had always taken for granted. When I walked into my childhood home, everything looked the same, but it felt very different. Of course, Mom was in the kitchen. When she saw me, she dropped her coffee mug and ran to me like I was 5 years old again. "I knew my prayers would bring you home," she whispered, hugging me so tightly that I could hardly breathe. "Mom," I said, pulling back to see her face. Really see her face. Maybe for the first time in years. "Your prayers did more than get me home. They took me to Jesus." I told her everything for the next 3 hours. Every part of the explosion, the crossing over, and the talk with Jesus. She listened with tears streaming down her face, nodding as if she had been waiting her whole life to hear this story. But I was most worried about talking to Dad. That night, I found him on the back porch, looking out at the sunset like he always did. Normally, I would have just nodded and gone inside, where we both felt at ease in the silence. This time, though, I sat down next to him. "Dad," I said, "I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to really listen." He seemed surprised, but he listened to what I had to say. When I got to the part where Jesus talked about his time in Vietnam and the guilt that was never his to bear, my father's face broke. "Son," he whispered, "I never wanted you to see what I saw over there. I never wanted you to come home with the same questions I've had for 40 years. Hey, Dad, Jesus told me to tell you something. You didn't make the choices that got you into that war. You were a young man doing the best he could for his country. You don't have to feel guilty about what happened. The people who sent you there do. I saw my dad cry for the first time in my life. We prayed together for the first time in years. Not just a quick blessing over dinner, but deep prayers for healing, forgiveness, and understanding. When Emily came home from college that weekend, she looked at me and said, "Danny, you're not the same. What happened to you?" I told her too, and she was quiet for a long time after that. She then said, "All those times I told you to think more deeply about what you were doing, I was hoping you'd find answers like this." I never thought they would come from actually meeting Jesus. I said, "You've been asking the right questions all along. You got my heart ready for what God wanted to show me. But it wasn't just my relationships with my family that changed. When I started looking at my life through the lens of eternity, everything changed. Money didn't matter as much as it used to. I turned down a job that paid more but would have kept me away from my family more. Instead, I got a job at the VA hospital, where I worked with other veterans who were dealing with the same guilt and questions I had. I began to speak at churches and tell my story. Not because I wanted attention, but because I kept thinking about that mother in Gaza singing to her scared little boy, and all the American mothers who didn't know their tax dollars were paying for the weapons that scared him. When I first talked about what Jesus had shown me about America's role in Gaza in front of other people, some people got uncomfortable, some people left. But then a woman came up to me with tears in her eyes. She said, "My son is going to war next month. I have been so proud of him and so sure he would do the right thing. But after hearing your story, I realized that I never thought about whether the fights we're picking are really good ones." At that point, I got what Jesus meant when he said that touching one person would touch others. That woman had put together a group of military families who were asking tougher questions about American foreign policy within 6 months. They weren't against the military. They loved their soldiers too much to want them to fight in wars that didn't have a clear moral purpose. I think about eternity every day when I wake up, not in a sad way, but with this beautiful understanding that every conversation matters, every act of kindness matters, and every moment of love will last forever. When I'm with my family, I'm really there. I'm not checking my phone, thinking about work, or letting myself get distracted by things that won't matter in 100 years. I remember that little boy who looked scared when he saw me, and I pray for him every night. I pray for his mother, for the people in charge of his future. and for Americans who could ask for better from their government, but don't know they need to. You might be reading this and thinking about your own life. Like my dad, you might have been feeling guilty about something that wasn't your fault. You might have been asking tough questions but feeling like no one else was there to help you, like Emily did. You might have been going through the motions of faith without the fire, like I was. I want you to know that Jesus knows exactly where you are. He loves the person who asks as much as the person who believes, and the person who doubts as much as the person who believes. He's not looking for people who know everything. He's looking for people who are brave enough to care about others, even when it's hard. Your voice is more important than you think. You may never see how your choices affect others. People need to speak up for the children who are suffering in wars around the world and demand that their government show God's love for all of his children. I keep praying for that scared little boy. He doesn't know my name, and I might never meet him on this side of heaven. But because of what Jesus showed me, there is one more person in Texas who is fighting for his right to grow up in peace. And maybe, since you've heard this story, he'll have one more person with him wherever you are. Jesus is telling us all to wake up, love more, and tell the truth even when it's hard. He's telling America to remember her duty as a protector of the innocent, not someone who makes their suffering worse. It's not too late. For all of us, love always finds a way, and Jesus is still changing hearts, healing families, and changing lives, just like he did for a soldier in Texas who didn't believe he could be found because he was too lost.